Ladies and gentlemen, would you please check your ideas and opinions at the door? All your philosophical and religious views, all your logic, I say check it at the door because you can pick it up again when you go out if you feel unsafe without it. I'm not trying to argue you out of your opinions and views. I'm merely suggesting that for the sake of an experiment, you temporarily suspend them and view what is as if you didn't even know how to talk. Red is not red, blue is not blue. Hard is not hard, soft is not soft. Male is not male, female is not female. And as I talk to you, you will find yourselves thinking in a compulsive and habitual way, this is red, this is green, this is something, this is nothing, this is solid, this is space. All right, but treat those thoughts that are going on in your head in exactly the same way as if they were, see? That's all they are. Now, please don't get agitated that this is an anti-intellectual point of view, that this is undermining the value of logic and reason and so on. We'll bring all that back later when we need it. But just for the time being, let's simplify. Close your eyes. Listen. I believe that if we are honest with ourselves, that the most fascinating problem in the world is, who am I? What do you mean when you say the word I? I, myself. I've been very interested in this problem for a long, long time, and I've come to the conclusion that what most civilized people mean by that word is a hallucination. That is to say, a false sense of personal identity that is at complete variance with the facts of nature. And as a result of having a false sense of identity, we act in a way that is inappropriate to our natural environment. And when that inappropriate way of action is magnified by a very powerful technology, we swiftly begin to see the results of a profound discord between man and nature. And we are indeed preparing to destroy the planet with nuclear energy and other processes. And we have not realized, therefore, that our environment is not something other than ourselves. In assuming that it is, we have made a great mistake and are now paying the price for it. It should be obvious that we cannot exist except in an environment of earth, air, water, and solar temperature, that all these things go with us and are as important to us, albeit outside our skins, as our internal organs, heart, stomach, brain, and so forth. Your real self, in other words, is the universe as centered on your organism. That's you. What you do is also a doing of your environment. Your behavior is its behavior as much as its behavior is your behavior. It's mutual. You are not a puppet which your environment pushes around, nor is the environment a puppet which you push around. They go together. They act together. In the same way, for example, when you handle the steering wheel of a car, are you pulling it or are you pushing it? No, you're doing both, aren't you? When you pull it down this side, you are pushing it up that side. It's all one. So there's a push-pull between organism and environment. Now, if then we cannot describe the behavior of organisms without at the same time describing the behavior of their environments, we should realize that we have a new entity of description. Not the individual organism alone, but what would now be called a field of behavior, which we must call rather clumsily the organism environment. You go with your environment in the same way as your head goes with the rest of your body. But in the ordinary way, we don't feel it. That is to say, we don't have a vivid sensation of belonging to our environment in the same way that we have a vivid sensation of being an ego inside a bag of skin, located mostly in the skull, about halfway between the ears and a little way behind the eyes. And it issues in these disastrous results of the ego, which, according to 19th century common sense, feels that it is a fluke in nature, and that if it does not fight nature, it will not be able to maintain its status as intelligent fluke. So the geneticists are now saying, and many others are now saying, that man must take the course of his evolution into his own hands. He can no longer trust the wiggly, random, and unintelligible processes of nature to develop him any further, but he must interfere with his own intelligence and through genetic alterations breed the kind of people who will be viable for human society. And that sort of thing. Now this, I submit, is a ghastly error, because human intelligence has a very serious limitation, and with that equipment also, be it said, we are trying to solve our political, economic, and social problems. And naturally, everybody has the sense of total frustration. And the individual feels, well, what on earth can I do? So then we get back to the question of what do we mean by I? We are only rarely aware of this as when, in curious alterations of consciousness, which we call mystical experience, cosmic consciousness, an individual gets the feeling that everything that is happening is his own doing. Or the opposite of that feeling, that he isn't doing anything, but that all his doings, his decisions and so forth, are happenings of nature. You can feel it either way. You can describe it in these two completely opposite ways, but you're talking about the same experience. You're talking about experiencing your own activity and the activity of nature as one single process. And you can describe it as if you were omnipotent like God, or as if it were completely deterministic and you hardly existed at all. But remember, both points of view are right. And we'll see where that gets us. When we think of a person, say you suddenly think of your mother, what do you think of? The face. And we're used to representing people in the newspapers, in magazines, in books, and in art galleries with a head and shoulders portrait. We think that the feet, the legs, the behind, the torso, all that is somehow irrelevant. But you see, here's this truncated face. That's the person. And oddly enough, the very word person is the Latin persona, that through which sound passes, and it refers to the megaphone mask worn by actors in Greco-Roman drama. The dramatis personae, the list of the characters to appear in the play, is originally the list of masks that will be worn. And therefore your person, your personality, your face, is your mask. And the question is, therefore, what is behind the mask?
So in this meditation, we're going to look at the nature of self, of what we call ourself, the nature of this thing called me. Where is this thing called self? Me. It is easy to find a thought. It's easy to feel a feeling. It's easy to find the tip of your toe or the palm of your hand if someone was to ask you where it was. For there is always something more primary. There is what's seeing the thought, that which is feeling the feeling. There is that which is aware of the body. And so attention gets directed inward. What is that that notices a thought? What is that that feels a feeling? What is this thing called me? Called I? And as we direct attention inward for the essential nature of ourself, the more we look for ourself, the less we find. When you look inside, what am I really, truly, without recourse to some past explanation, some theory, some dogma, but in one's own actual experience? This elusive self never seems to appear. And yet, what is it that notices that void, that silence? What is it that is aware? You may notice that it's very difficult for your mind to think in terms of you, of self being other than a thing, being other than a someone, a somebody. This is very difficult for the mind. It's an opportunity to open to that maybe you are not a thing at all, a somebody at all. It cannot be found. So maybe, just maybe, you never were a something or a somebody. Maybe it can't be found because it doesn't exist. And your whole definition of yourself is then called into question. What then could this thing called I be? So this questioning, this investigation leads you to the end point, to the place where there is no entity, where there is no somebody. And there is an invitation to just rest there, to stop there. Not to think about it, not to define it, but stop. In that place where there's no definition, in that place where you can't find yourself as a thing or a somebody, Don't resist it. Don't run away from it. Don't try to figure it out. Just stop there. Then you see that you are not the seeker. The seeker was an imagination. That you are what you were seeking all along.
So then, here's the drama. That there is the central self, you can call it God, you can call it anything you like. And it's all of us. It's playing all the parts of all beings whatsoever, everywhere and anywhere. And it's playing the game of hide and seek with itself. It gets lost, it gets involved in the farthest out adventures, but in the end, it always wakes up and comes back to itself. And when you're ready to wake up, you're going to wake up. And if you're not ready, you're going to stay pretending that you're just a little, poor little me. And since you're all here and engaged in this sort of inquiry and listening to this sort of lecture, I assume that you're all on the process of waking up. Or else you're teasing yourselves with some kind of flirtation with waking up, which you're not serious about. But I assume that you are ready to wake up. So then, when you're in the way of waking up and finding out who you really are, you meet a character called a guru. And what is the function of a guru? He's the man who looks at you in the eye and says, oh, come off it. I know who you are. But let me say right from the start, there are many kinds of gurus. The gurus may be situations, a certain kind of problem or encounter. Even a book can to some extent be a guru. But the problem of the guru is to show the inquirer in some effective way that he already has what he's looking for. You know, you come to the Guru and say, "Sir, I have a problem. I'm unhappy and I want to get one up on the universe, or I want to become enlightened. I want spiritual wisdom. Who was I in my last incarnation?" As if that mattered. And the Guru looks at you and says, "Who are you? Who is asking the question?" Go back in and find out who you are, where the question comes from. So everybody is fundamentally the ultimate reality. Not God in a politically kingly sense, but God in the sense of being the self, the deep down basic whatever there is. And you're all that. Only you're pretending you're not.
What's wearing this mask that we've given a name to, and a birthday, and an age, and a gender? What's wearing that mask? You are the self within all selves. You are that spirit. You are the thing that Jesus and Buddha and Moses and all the great teachers, and the same thing that people have realized that never were spiritual teachers you never heard about, fully realized beings that were grandmothers and granddaughters and shopkeepers and who knows what. And since that's what everyone is, since that's what you are, it must be available now. Because what you are is what you are. It is not what you can become, it is what you are. And since it's what you are, it must be available right now. It's right there. It's hearing through your ears, it's looking through your eyes, it's sensing through your senses. What is that that hears? What is that that looks? What is that that's awake and aware to this very moment? What is that? Don't figure it out. Don't turn it into an idea. If there's nothing there, then immediately enter that nothingness. Enter that dark, beautiful, divine night. Enter it.
They say there was a primordial explosion, enormous bang millions of years ago, billions of years ago, which flung all the galaxies into space. Well, let's take that just for the sake of argument and say that was the way it happened. It's like you took a bottle of ink and you threw it at a wall. Smash, and all that ink spreads. And in the middle, it's dense, isn't it? And as it gets out on the edge, the little droplets are finer and finer and make more complicated patterns. See? So in the same way, there was a big bang in the beginning of things, and it spread. And you and I, sitting here in this room, as complicated human beings, are way, way out on the fringe of that bang. We're the complicated little patterns on the end of it. But so we define ourselves as being only that. Billions of years ago, you were a big bang. But now you're a complicated human being. And then we cut ourselves off like this and don't feel that we're still the Big Bang. But you are. You're not something that is a result of the Big Bang on the end of the process. You are still the process. Being based on a myth that we are made, that we are parts, that we are things, our consciousness has been influenced so that each one of us does not feel that. We have been hypnotized, literally hypnotized, by social convention into feeling and sensing that we exist only inside our skins, that we are not the original bang, but just something out on the end of it. Now, why does anybody think that way? There's no reason to, because it isn't even scientific. It's just a myth. What's the alternative? Supposing that I say to you, each one of you is really the Great Self. And you say, well, all you've said up till now makes me fairly sympathetic to this intellectually, but I don't really feel it. What must I do to feel it really? My answer to you is this. You ask me that question because you don't want to feel it really. You're frightened of it. Therefore, what you're going to do is you're going to get a method of practice so that you can put it off. So that I can say, well, I can be a long time on the way getting this thing. Then maybe I'll be worthy of it after I have suffered enough. Because one is afraid, here and now, to see it. So I invent for myself an elaborate system of delaying my waking up. I put myself through this test and that test, and when I feel it's been sufficiently arduous, then I may at last admit to myself who I really am, and draw aside the veil and realize that after all, when all is said and done, I am that I am, which is the name of God.
And then probably some of you have had the experience, you're in this kind of interesting adventure at the beginning, and then one day something else arises within you. You get this unsettling feeling that your own spiritual search doesn't actually belong entirely to you. That there's something from outside of the ego that is, how can we say, almost imposing itself in a way. The game kind of shifts. It's as if you, as an ego, can be chasing God, enlightenment, or wherever do you want to think. So there you are as an ego chasing God. In whatever way you do that, prayer, meditation, listening to spiritual talks, reading books, whatever. And then all of a sudden, one day, you realize it's reversed. And all of a sudden it feels like you are being chased by God. And you still don't know what God is, or Buddha nature, or the self, or any of these terms for that which is infinitely bigger than the ego. But you can feel the transition from when the spiritual instinct within the self is activated. In other words, you can't just put it down when you want to, but you can put it down, but it'll pick itself back up. I mean, how many of you that are listening have said to yourself at times, okay, I'm done. I've had it with the whole spiritual thing, and I'm just going to put it down and have nothing to do with it. But strangely, maybe a day later, maybe a year later, maybe 5 years later, at some point it's almost like that spiritual instinct comes back to you. You realize it's something that's calling for a kind of response from you. From the ego's point of view, this whole awakening project is itself quite threatening. Its just natural reaction is to see it as an existential threat. Because in one sense, there is a death that happens, especially if it's very deep and very profound. There's a death of seeing the way you saw life. One's quite literally awakening from everything they actually know. There's no dealing with this existential fear except at some point to meet it head on. The irony is that we are all already the infinite in essence and substance. That's the joke. We're afraid of the infinite, but at the same time we are the infinite. Sometimes people say, I can't help it. The contraction away from the infinite happens so instantaneously that I can't really stop it. Well, apparently you're just not ready when that happens. That's okay. Relax with that. And if you're not ready, you can try every trick in the book, and you won't be letting go. They're defeated not because you solve them, or you got bigger than them. You defeat them by simply not responding to them in the deepest possible way. Because in the end, that's the one gesture that fear can't overcome. You just stop. And I don't mean be still like you're holding on and really trying to be still. I mean the kind of still when you let go, when you relinquish your positionality. Your fixed way of being, when you just let go. There's no more time to waste. Where am I going? What am I avoiding? Let me just face it all right here, right now. Let me face my own mortality right now, because it's going to happen. You know, somebody that's faced their fear of their own death, and through facing the fear of their death has gone through it. That's the key. We go through these fears. We don't go around them. We don't solve them. We don't fix them. We don't create a big enough story to where it, it all looks nice and pretty. We just simply move through them, And only through doing that do you then realize there's really nothing to fear to begin with. We have to be able to stop right in the face of them. Stop in the midst of fear and just be still.
And so you kind of get a little discouraged and your faith flickers. Because you had the experience, you thought you knew, you took a stance to represent how you thought it was, and then suddenly it's all dead. And horrible. And ugly. And empty. Then you say, I've lost it. Faith flickers, and it's often followed by what's called the dark night of the soul. I lost it. You have depression, and then you say, well, I'll just go back into the world because the whole thing was phony anyway. The whole spiritual trip was a hype. And all those people in the world that said there was nothing to it were right, because I've lost it, and I'm not going to get screwed by not having anything. At least I'll have the world. So you go back into whatever part of the world you can grab onto again. The problem is that once it's happened, you can't forget it. You might try, you might sit at a bar and drink and lust and talk about soccer, but you won't be able to forget. Because once you've awakened, you can't get back to sleep. Fully. You can do pretty well. You can do pretty well, but you can't do it totally. You just can't do it totally. And at this time, because you have this ability to stand back a little bit from your whole trip, you begin to explore all of the things that you've held in before. And you explore relationships, and you explore sexuality, and you call it Tantra. And you sort of see what you can get and what you can enjoy. You see, the problem was, when you first have the experience that awakens, then you read about the spiritual models and you buy them with your mind, because the Western intellect is so leading the heart that you tend to buy how you ought to be ahead of when you're there. In fact, the person that's acknowledging their lust is, from my point of view, closer to God than a horny celibate. Because you pushed away your fascination with the world prematurely, and you're still fascinated. You still want to know what's happening. You're still looking outside in the world for something. You're looking for love, you're looking for relationship, you're looking for stimulation, you're looking for knowledge, you're looking for a titillation. As long as there's anything that your eyes can tell you, or your ears can tell you, or your nose, or your tongue, or your skin can tell you, or your thinking mind can know, you're still being pulled into the world. You've got to be the incarnation you are. And the more true you are about where you are, the faster the transformation happens. And when the trips start to fall away, if you're like me, you get really feeling angry and depressed. Because you look around and you see that ignorance is bliss. You see that everybody's getting fun out of bowling, and you don't want to bowl anymore. And you don't have anything else. It's the dark night of the soul, when you have lost the world and you're not yet tasting deeply enough of the Spirit. And it's a heavy period. There are a lot of heavy periods in this journey. And comes along with all this a kind of a deeper and a deeper understanding, a wisdom, a deeper wisdom. So you're understanding sort of how it all is and why this is all happening, and that yes, the trips will fall away, and it still hurts, because there are still the veils of attachment, of still wanting not to die into the Spirit. And finally, all of the precepts or the commandments or whatever they are become sort of obvious to you about that's the way life has to be, because that's the way it works. It's merely a statement of how it works. I'm just describing to you the stages of dying into Spirit. Because only when you are Spirit is there no death and no birth. And then you are. become who you truly are.
You taught me the courage of stars before you left, how light carries on endlessly, even after death, with sureness of breath. You explain the infinite, how rare and beautiful it is to even exist. I couldn't help but ask you to say it all again. I tried to write it down, but I could never find the pen. I'd give anything to hear you say it one more time, that the universe was made just to be seen by my eye. That I couldn't help but ask you to say it all again. I tried to write it down, but I could never find the pen. I'd give anything to hear you say it one more time, that the universe was made just to be seen by my eyes. The shortness of breath, I'll explain the infinite, how rare and beautiful it truly is that we exist.
We're all looking for something to the future to bring us a goodie. We know we ought to have. There's a golden goodie at the end of the line somewhere. There's a good time coming, be it ever so far away, that one far-off divine event to which all creation moves. We hope. And then you wonder why I can't do anything. Why I feel in the face of all the problems of the world impotent. And why I somehow cannot manage to transform I. Now here we get to the real problem. Because we're always telling each other that we should be different. Now I'm not going to tell you that tonight. Why not? Because I know you can't be. Nor can I. But everybody, you see, who is at all sensitive and awake to their own problems and human problems is trying to change himself. And the big difficulty is this. I want to find a method whereby I can change my consciousness. But therefore to improve myself. But the self that needs to be improved is the one that is doing the improving. And the joke of it all is your ego doesn't exist. There's nothing to get rid of. But you still want to ask how to stop the illusion. Now, who's asking? I mean, do you think, in the ordinary sense in which you use the word I, how can I stop identifying myself with the wrong me? Well, the answer is simply you can't. The Christians put this in their way when they say that mystical experience is a gift of divine grace. Man, as such, cannot achieve this experience. It is a gift of God, and if God doesn't give it to you, there's no way of getting it. Now, that is solidly true. You can't do anything about it because you don't exist. Pretty depressing news. But the whole point is, it isn't depressing news. It is the joyous news. Because if you cannot achieve it, if you cannot transform yourself, that means that the main obstacle to mystical vision has collapsed. That was you. And this is not a state of affairs that you should realize. I cannot possibly preach it to you, because the minute you start thinking, I should understand that, this is this stupid notion again that I should bring it about, when there is no you to bring it about. You can't control your thoughts. You can't control your feelings, because there is no controller. And they're running along, running along, running along. Just sit and watch them. Here they go. You're still breathing, aren't you? Still growing your hair? Still seeing and hearing? Are you doing that? I mean, is breathing something that you do? Do you see? I mean, do you organize the operations of your eyes? Know exactly how to work those rods and cones in the retina? Do you do that? It's a happening. It happens. So you can feel all this happening. Your breathing is happening. Your thinking is happening. Your feeling is happening. You're hearing, you're seeing. The clouds are happening across the sky. The sky is happening blue. The sun is happening shining. There it is. All this happened. And may I introduce you? This is yourself. This begins to be a vision of who you really are. You see, this is the whole approach here is not to convert you, not to make you over, not to improve you, but for you to discover that if you really knew the way you are, things would be sane. But you see, you can't do that. You can't make that discovery because you're in your own way. So long as you think, I'm I. so long as that hallucination blocks it. And the hallucination disappears only in the realization of its own futility. When at last you see you can't do it.
So it's a question fundamentally. Do you define yourself as a victim of the world or as the world? You see, if you identify you with what you call the voluntary system of the nerves and say, only that's me, and that's really a rather limited amount of my total performance, what I do voluntarily, then you've defined yourself as the victim in the game. And so you are able to feel that life was a trap. Something else, whether it was God or whether it was fate or whether it was the big mechanism, the system, imposed this on you. And you can say, poor little me. But you can equally well, and with just as much justification, define yourself not only as what you do voluntarily, but also what you do involuntarily. That's what you do. Do you beat your heart or don't you? Or does it just happen to you? And if you define yourself as the works, then nobody's imposing on you. You're not a victim. You're doing it. Because you can't explain how you do it in words, because words are too clumsy. And it takes too long to say. But actually, then you can say, with gusto, I am responsible for this life. Whether comedy or tragedy, I did it. And it seems to me that that is a basis for behavior and going on, which is more fundamentally joyous and profitable and great than defining ourselves as miserable victims.
I just want to issue some warnings, I guess, here for the end, which is be very, very careful not to turn the things I say into an ideology. Your mind is going to want to cling to these things and turn this into a sort of a map or a model of awakening. But the map and the model is not the territory, as they say. I don't expect you or even want you to believe the things that I say. This path will be very individual for you guys, for each one of you. This might not be how it unfolds for you. You may not experience all the things that I experience because, hey, you know, when I'm having my communications with God, it's communicating to me in exactly the ways that I need for me to awaken. So I have to go through what I'm going through. What you might have to go through is different because you have a different personality, you have a different genetics, you have different life experiences, different traumas, different emotional problems, and so forth. But overall, we're going to converge. We're going to agree on many of these things. We're going to agree on infinite consciousness. We're going to agree on absolute truth. We're going to agree on God. We're going to agree on love and so forth. These things, no one really disputes these things. It's just like how you get there and what the process looks like to get there. And I guess the other thing I just want to stress to you is just be really, really open to questioning the depth of your awakening. Whatever awakening you think you've already had, just be open to the possibility that there's more. See? Now you might say, oh, Leo, but this is just chasing. Now you're indulging in spiritual chasing. How long are you going to chase? Are you going to keep chasing and chasing and chasing forever? When does it end? And the only thing I can tell you is that I don't know when it ends or where it ends. Maybe it has no end. And if that means I chase forever, then I chase forever. Or maybe at some point I reach an end, then I reach an end, and I'm going to be there. It's just a question of how deeply do you really want to know what you are?
What I think, awakening really involves is a re-examination of our common sense. And so then as you question this basic assumption that underlies our culture, you find you get a new kind of common sense. It becomes absolutely obvious to you that you are continuous with the universe. For example, people used to believe that the people who lived in the Antipodes would fall off, and that was scary. But then when somebody sailed around the world, and we all got used to it, and now we travel around in jet planes and everything, we have no problem about feeling that the Earth is globular. None whatever. We got used to it. So in the same way, Einstein's relativity theories, the curvature of the propagation of light, that began to bother people when Einstein started talking like that. But now we're all used to it. Well, in a few years, it will be a matter of common sense to very many people that they're one with the universe. It'll be so simple. And then maybe, if that happens, we shall be in a position to handle our technology with more sense. With love instead of with hate for our environment.
If you were the Supreme Self, what would you do? I mean, would you just sit there and be blissfully one and everything forever and ever and ever? No, obviously not. You would play games, and you would get lost, and you get involved in all sorts of adventures, and you would forget who you were. Just as when you play a game, playing poker, and although you're only playing for dimes or for chips, you get absorbed in the game. And nothing really important to win, nothing really important to lose, and yet it becomes fantastically interesting. Who wins and who loses? And so in the same way it is said that the Supreme Self gets absorbed through ever so many different channels, which we call all the different beings. Just like an artist or a writer gets completely absorbed in the artistic creation that he's doing, or an actor gets absorbed in the part in the drama. At first we know it's a drama. We go to a play and we say it's only a play, and the proscenium arch tells us that what happens behind that arch is not for real, just a show. But the great actor is going to make you forget it's just a show. He's going to have you sitting on the edge of your chair. He's going to have you crying. He's going to have you trembling, because he almost persuades you that it's real. And what would happen if the very best actor was confronted by the very best audience, why, they'd be taken in completely, and the one would confirm the other. So this is the idea of the universe as drama. That the fundamental self plays this game, gets involved in being all of us, and does it so damn well that the thing appears to be real. We're not only sitting on the edge of our chair, but we start to get up and throw things. We join in the drama, and it all becomes whatever it is that's going on, see? Then, of course, at the end of the drama, the curtain goes down and the actors retire to the green room. And there, the villain and the hero cease to be villain and hero. And then they come out in front of the curtain and they stand in a row and the audience applauds the villain along with the hero. The villain for having been a good villain, the hero for having been a great hero. The play is over. And everybody heaves a sigh of relief. Well, that was a great show, wasn't it? So the same idea, the green room, that behind the whole show, where there are no differentiations of I and thou, subject and object, good and evil, light and darkness, life and death. But a great actor can assume any kind of personality, male or female, can suddenly convert himself right in front of the audience into somebody who takes you in entirely. But in the green room, he's his usual self. That all this world is a big act, the play of the Supreme Self. And it's therefore compared to a dream, and you should not therefore take it seriously. You may take it sincerely, perhaps, as an actor may be sincere in his acting, but not serious, because that means it throws you for a loop. But you see, one of the great questions that you have to ask yourself, when you really get down to the nitty-gritty about your own inmost core, is, are you serious? Or do you know deep within you who you really are?